Ozzy Ellis, Eamon Maloney, John Halligan, Ruth Coppinger. We'll call them in that order. Deputy Clare Daly, 10 minutes each.
Yeah, thanks, Concord. I just maybe want to make a few brief points. When I was listening to the Minister there, it did remind me a little bit of the experience that Deputy Murphy referred to, that particularly at the height of the boom, when people in constituencies like our own were queuing up to buy houses, being told if you don't sign now, it's going to go up by about 10 or 20 grand, and don't be worrying about that little detail about a management company. Sure, you can always come along later on and decide yourselves to dissolve it and you'll be all right. And of course the experience became radically different than that. But the government's response to Deputy Murphy's motion and bill here today is a little bit similar, because it's kind of like, don't be worrying about, we'd be afraid now if we were to agree with Deputy Murphy that we'd remove the protection of the MUDS Act, when the point being made in part is that the MUDS Act hasn't been the protection that we thought it would be, and it hasn't been the solution to the problem that was identified by the mushrooming of management companies that took place mainly around the early part of the 2000s. Now, we know that this arose out of the change in the nature of the types of buildings that were going up at that time, moving away from the traditional semi-detached type of development to much more duplexes, which were probably never heard of before then, combined with apartments and normal dwellings, terraced houses and so on. And people found out, to their amazement, only probably a couple of years into those houses, that they were expected to pay an annual fee for issues which normally would have been deemed to be part of normal public services: the cutting of grass, the maintenance of lights, upkeep of the general area, and the, I suppose, appalling sort of realisation that these people, who in many instances had bought modest dwellings at massively inflated prices, were paying this annual fee when people in more settled and affluent dwellings down the road had those services provided out of the public purse and as a public service provided by the local authority, which to my mind it should have been funded by the taxpayer. And I think the situation has been aggravated and made worse by the emergence of the local property tax, where these people are now hit, if you like, on the treble. General taxation, which should fund local authorities for services, local property tax, which should serve as well, and they're being paying again on the treble. And the reality is that in most of these instances, the money that's been requested from hard-pressed families who are struggling anyway to pay their mortgages and other bills, they're not actually getting any service for that. And the MUDS Act was designed to make it easier for owners to control the management companies and to have an exercise of democratic control over the bills and over how those companies will be structured. But in practice that hasn't worked, because there's these multi-unit developments. First of all, many of them are massively too large. If you're dealing with a development of 500 houses made up of all sorts of different owners, duplexes, apartment owners, you're never going to get agreement, wholehearted agreement between 500 owners. It's an absolute impossibility, and particularly when there are different interests at play. When maybe the apartment owners who do need a collective interest, is perfectly logical and necessary for apartment owners to have a management company, not so much in terms of houses. But if the houses are contributing to the overall coffers, well, you can understand why the apartment owners wouldn't want to lose that revenue to the management company and so on. And even in instances where there is a clear division between services, the reality is that many management companies exist for no reason. People often think that these services, once the local authority takes in charge, the roads, the footpaths, the lighting, and in many areas, the big green areas, that's it, that now the management company will dissolve and go away. Then they found out that in actual fact, the issues which the management company are taking over were the bits that the developer was responsible for prior to that, and the bits that they're left with is the realisation that the management company only existed in name to provide public liability insurance and probably for the maintenance of tiny incidental little pieces of open space with a little bit of shrubbery that any able-bodied child could go out and fix the bit of grass on that. You certainly don't need a management company for that. And the MUDS Act hasn't been fit for purpose to allow those people who don't get any service whatsoever to dissolve that company and protect their own interests in that regard. In my own area, I have an estate of over 400 units, all of them standard housing. Terraced housing, a mixture of various different types, no apartments, no duplexes. Most of the services, the roads, the big green areas, practically everything has been taken over by the local authority, and all that you've left is the tiny little incidental pieces of open space or a little bit of on-street car parking, which has legitimised the existence of management companies who only exist to perpetuate and fund the management company. People don't actually get any services for that. So it's absolutely ludicrous. And what Deputy Murphy is trying to do here is to stop an anomaly in this legislation. I mean, I want to flag, obviously, that we need to reform the overall MUDS Act. But the deficiency that Deputy Murphy has identified, that unwittingly this Act actually might frog march people into that arrangement when the whole Act was designed to protect people from being in that situation, that they couldn't dissolve a management company, is ludicrous. And why he wouldn't even just go along with that, I can't see any sense in that. And we do need a bigger picture on this. We need to be looking at the overall Act, I have to say. I mean, there are instances now where I have a number of estates in my own, which are not that complicated, developments of maybe 100 units or less, evenly broken down between houses and apartments or duplexes, and an even division of services where you could clearly delineate that actually the houses don't get anything and they can be easily, if you like, sliced off. The idea that even in those areas which are more manageable, residents haven't been able to exercise the withdrawal of the houses from those companies kind of really exposes the limitations of this Act, and I think it is a body of work that we absolutely have to return to. But I think for the moment it's really useful that Deputy Murphy has highlighted this, has flagged it, and I think he'd be mad not to accept it, because we should be trying to stop more units that don't need to be going into these. There is no protection really in the Act at the moment. It's a little bit better for apartment owners, but for mixed unit developments where the idea was put out that this Act would assist them in maintaining control and being able to make decisions, including the decision to break up the company if that's what they wanted, it hasn't been fit for purpose on this. And I think in that sense the motion by Deputy Murphy is very welcome, and I do support it.